I've never been to Iraq before, and the part of Iraq that I visited and where ADRA is operational is in Kurdistan. And ADRA has been registered in Kurdistan in this year, 2015, and has an office and staff and operations going. And I was not prepared for the beauty of the country, especially northern Kurdistan, lovely valleys and hills and historical sites going back 2,000-3,000 years or more, and delightful people and very wonderful communities. That's on the positive side. On the other side is the horror of all of the hundreds and thousands of people whose lives have been disrupted by the conflict going on in the region. People who are used to living a normal, decent life that we in Canada would understand and relate to, but being forced at gunpoint to run from their homes, often leaving behind dead loved ones, leaving behind all of their cars, their houses, their goods, and now being on the street or in a refugee camp. Our ADRA Kurdistan colleagues are very careful in monitoring the security situation. They are part of a consortium which has very technical and qualified personnel monitoring the military, the civil conflict, and that oversight body gives them the necessary information when roads are closed, when conflict is occurring in one area, when another area might be safe. For instance, I joined the staff going to a distribution of ADRA Canada relief goods to refugees. And I looked on the map and I assumed that we would be going in this direction. But in fact, we went in this direction because they had been advised that the shortest way would have gone through a conflict area. So our staff monitor that, and we endeavor at all times to stay as safe as possible. At the moment, it's a new office, and we're responding to the current crisis. So most of what we're doing is helping people to adjust to this time of distress. And that means handing out things for those people who need blankets and emergency clothes and cooking supplies and other things in order to survive. These people are often in host communities, and of course that puts a strain on the host family, and also providing support to the refugee camps that are operated under the auspices of the UN, providing schooling for the children, support groups for women and girls, even support groups for men, so many different activities to try to help the people who are in the camp to adjust to what's happening, to process the awful dilemma that they are facing, and to give them the courage and the strength to go forward. We in Canada, like so many in the world, are watching with horror the events that are unfolding in what we call the Middle East and that part of the region. And we know that there are so many people who are suffering as a result of what is taking place. And our hearts go out to them, and we feel that it's our duty, if possible, to extend a helping hand and a comforting arm to these people in crisis. And fortunately, we in Canada have been able to mobilize support not only from our supporters, our constituency, but also from the Canadian government. And we were able to negotiate and secure a significant grant, actually a couple of grants from the International Humanitarian Assistance Unit of the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, which has allowed us to equip our ADRA Kurdistan office and give them the necessary supplies in order to reach out to the victims of this trouble. For me, I'm more used to distributions occurring in the global south, where people are very, very poor to start with, and who are then thrust into a situation which is even worse than from what they came. What I found in Kurdistan was something very different. The people who came from homes, who had access to resources, who had 2-3 meals a day, who had access to healthcare, access to education, and who now have come to this place where they have nothing. And so I saw a very different picture of many people who appeared to be reasonably well dressed even, but they've fled in those clothes. They have nothing else. And clearly there are huge issues of dignity loss that they're suffering, because here are people who are used to taking care of themselves. Can you imagine for yourself, for myself, we take care of ourselves, we take care of our families, we ensure that there's food and water and clothing. But then to be in a place where you cannot do anything for your family, you lose dignity, you lose your self-worth, and then you have to line up to receive some assistance from somebody. There are very large psychosocial issues that we try to help people to process. And of course, there's the usual security issues of trying to hand out things in a safe and secure and fair way. And we work very closely with the local government officials to identify those who are the most vulnerable, those most at need, and ensure that they get the help that they need. When I visited the IDP camp, the internally displaced camp, actually it's a refugee camp as well, just outside of Erbil in Kurdistan, a number of emotions flowed over me. Pride for what ADRA Canada is doing through ADRA Kurdistan, but also a great deal of sadness for the tragic plight of the people who are there. Some of the people that we talked to in the camp told us horrible stories of being victims of violence, rape, sexual assault, tragic stories of being wrenched from their homes, being herded at gunpoint, being given very difficult choices like give us everything that you own or we will kill your child or your wife or your mother. One of the ladies that we talked with had had her 7-year-old child killed in front of her by the militants. Our project director was telling me how he found a young boy wandering outside the camp one morning when he came to work. And he asked the boy what he was doing, and the boy said he was looking for his parents. Well, our project director knew that his parents had been killed by the conflict, but somehow the boy had not yet processed this, and he had to gently lead the boy back into the camp and put him in the hands of a caretaker, a caregiver, and realized that there was nothing that he could do to take away the hurt and the pain of the young boy who had lost his parents and yet still didn't know how to process that. I was very pleased to see that the ADRA staff were very engaged with people, and I heard many stories of how the folks living in the camp appreciate the ADRA staff and the ADRA program. It seems that there are some other agencies that come in for just an hour or two a day and then they disappear. But the ADRA staff are there all day with programs for the children, programs for the mothers and girls, programs for the men, trying to meet their needs. Not just the physical needs, but to help them to deal with the situation in which they find themselves. Make sure that the children are still engaged in some learning activities and finding time for fun in all of this hostility and pain.